The conditions we call mental illness today, schizophrenia, severe depression, and the rest, are not modern. They are ancient. The genes associated with some of them have been with our species for tens of thousands of years, which raises a genuinely strange question. If these conditions are so old, and in some cases so disruptive, why didn't evolution erase them? Why are they still here? The answer forces us to ask something uncomfortable. What if, in the world our ancestors actually lived in, the line between madness and gift was not where we draw it today? This is the story of what ancient humans did with the minds that didn't fit. And I'll be honest with you up front, the way I always try to be. This is one of the hardest topics to study in all of prehistory, because thoughts don't fossilize. We're going to be doing a lot of careful, evidence-guided inference here, and I'll tell you every time we cross from solid ground into speculation. But what we can piece together is genuinely fascinating, and it will change how you think about the human mind. Let's start by taking apart the word in the title, insane. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you. For most of human history, that idea, the idea of a mind being medically broken, simply did not exist. Now, I want to be very clear about what I'm not saying. I am not saying nobody ever lost touch with reality. People did. The human brain is the human brain, and it has been capable of the full range of human experience, including its most frightening and disorienting states, for as long as we've been us. Someone 25,000 years ago could absolutely hear voices, fall into a despair so deep they couldn't move, or see things no one else could see. The experiences are old. What's new, startlingly new, is the framework we use to understand them. Because mental illness is not just a description of what's happening in a brain. It's a story a society tells about what's happening, and that story shapes everything. How the person is treated, what role they're given, whether they're feared or revered or helped or hidden. And the story your ancestors told was nothing like ours. We see a medical problem. We reach for a diagnosis and a treatment. They saw something else entirely. And to understand what, you have to understand the world they were seeing it in. So picture that world. Not a city, not even a village, a band. A few dozen people, at most, who have known each other their entire lives. There are no strangers. There is no privacy, nowhere to be alone, nowhere to hide a struggling mind. If something changes in one person, everyone knows immediately. Because everyone is always there. And crucially, there is no institution to hand the problem to. No hospital, no asylum, no doctor, no authority outside the group. Whatever happens to this person happens here, in front of everyone, and the group itself has to decide what it means. Now here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because in that world, a mind that worked differently was not automatically a problem to be solved. Sometimes it was a resource. Across an enormous range of human cultures, studied by anthropologists on nearly every continent, we find a recurring figure. The shaman, the medicine person, the one who walks between the ordinary world and the world of spirits. And here is the detail that should stop you. In culture after culture, the path to becoming that figure often began with exactly the kind of experience we would now call a mental health crisis. A period of withdrawal, of visions, of voices, of profound disturbance, sometimes in adolescence, sometimes triggered by illness or trauma. In many traditions, this wasn't a disqualification, it was the calling. The person who fell apart and came back, who heard the voices and learned to live with them, who traveled to terrifying inner places and returned, was seen as uniquely qualified to guide others. Scholars have a name for the pattern, the wounded healer, and it shows up again and again. I have to be careful here, because this is interpretation, not certainty, and we should never flatten the real suffering of mental illness into a tidy story about ancient wisdom. But the pattern is real and widespread enough that it tells us something important. In many human societies, an altered mind was not only tolerated, it was given meaning, and sometimes power. The same experience that might isolate a person completely, in a modern context could, in a small ancient band, slot them into one of the most important social roles that existed. The person who didn't fit became the person the group could not do without. Think about what that does. A modern person experiencing the onset of something like psychosis often faces it alone, terrified, with no framework that makes sense of it, except, I am sick, I am broken. Something has gone wrong with me. An ancient person having a structurally similar experience might be told by everyone they had ever known, this is happening because you are special. The spirits have chosen you. We need you. That framework doesn't make the underlying experience any less real or any less difficult. But the meaning wrapped around it and the place it earned you in the group could be the difference between an unbearable burden and a bearable, even valued life. Meaning is not a cure. But meaning is not nothing either. We'll come back to that because it's the heart of this whole story. But, and this is a big but, it was not all reverence and sacred roles. I'd be lying to you if I painted it that way, and I promised honesty. So let's talk about the holes in the skulls. We've found ancient human skulls from many different times and places with holes deliberately cut or scraped or drilled into them while the person was alive. The practice is called trepanation, and as I've mentioned before on this channel, a remarkable number of these patients survived because the bone shows clear signs of healing around the opening. Now, we often can't be certain why any individual trepanation was done. Some were almost certainly medical, releasing pressure after a head injury. But one long-standing hypothesis, and I want to flag clearly that it is a hypothesis, is that at least some trepanations were attempts to treat what we now call mental or neurological conditions, seizures, persistent headaches, behavior the group found disturbing, and the logic, if this interpretation is right, is chilling in its directness. If something has gotten inside this person's head, something causing the strange behavior, the voices, the fits, then perhaps you can make a door and let it out. Sit with that for a moment. A person whose mind frightens the people around them, held down, awake, while someone they trust opens their skull with a sharpened stone to release whatever has taken hold. We don't know how often this happened, or how often it was tied to mental states specifically rather than physical injury. But the supernatural model of a troubled mind, the idea that disturbance is caused by a spirit, a possession, an intruding force, is one of the most widespread human ideas there is, found across cultures that never had any contact. And that model cuts both ways. It can make you sacred. It can also make you a vessel for something that needs to be driven out. And then there's the harshest possibility of all, exile. In a small band, living at the edge of survival, every member matters. But a member who becomes genuinely dangerous, violent, unpredictable, in a way that threatens the group's safety, posed a problem with no good solution. There was no prison to hold them, no facility to send them to. And in that world, to be cast out of the group, to be made to leave and survive alone, was very close to a death sentence. Humans are not built to survive in isolation in the wild. We made it this far precisely because we stuck together. So, for some individuals, whose condition the group could not understand, could not use, and could not safely contain, the outcome may simply have been abandonment. Not out of cruelty necessarily, but out of a brutal arithmetic. We are lucky to have largely escaped. I don't say that to be grim for its own sake. I say it because the truth is that the ancient response to a suffering mind ranged across the entire spectrum of human possibility, from reverence to fear to care to abandonment, often depending on nothing more than which way the suffering happened to point. So let's pull back and ask the question the hook set up, because it's a real scientific puzzle and the answer ties everything together. If conditions like schizophrenia are partly heritable, ancient, and can be profoundly disruptive to survival and reproduction, why are the associated genes still in the human population at all? Shouldn't natural selection have weeded them out over tens of thousands of years? There are several competing ideas, and I want to be clear, these are debated, not settled. One is that the genetic variations involved are many and subtle, scattered across the genome, and that the same variations that, in a certain combination, contribute to a disorder may, in other combinations, contribute to traits that were useful: heightened pattern detection, vivid imagination, intense focus, creativity, unusual ways of seeing the world. The trait and the vulnerability may be two faces of the same coin. Another idea points to the role we just discussed, that in ancestral social environments, some of these differences weren't purely costs, that a mind prone to visions or profound emotional depth could occupy a niche. The seer, the artist, the healer, the one who notices what others miss, in a way that carried real value for the group and the individual. We can't run the experiment, we can't go back. But the persistence of these ancient traits is a genuine clue that, in the environment that actually shaped us, they were not simply broken. The category disorder is partly a product of the world we put the mind into. Change the world, and you change where the line falls. And that brings us to what I think is the most important thread in this entire story: meaning, belonging, the frame. Here is something modern science takes very seriously. The human mind does dramatically better when suffering has a place to live. When a person in distress is surrounded by people who hold them, who give their experience a name and a story and a role, who do not abandon them to face it alone, the outcomes are measurably different than when that person is isolated and told only that they are malfunctioning. This isn't mysticism. A sense of meaning, of belonging, of being needed, genuinely affects how the brain processes distress, and we can see it in real research. On community and recovery today. In some studies, certain serious mental health conditions actually have better long-term outcomes in less industrialized, more communal societies than in wealthy ones, a finding that has surprised and humbled researchers. And while the reasons are debated and complex, the role of social embeddedness keeps coming up. What that suggests is genuinely moving. Ancient humans, with no medicine, no science, no understanding of the brain at all, may have stumbled onto one of the most powerful things. You can offer a suffering mind. You are not alone. You are one of us. And your experience means something. They couldn't fix a broken brain, but they could refuse to let a struggling person fall out of the human circle. And for many conditions, that refusal is itself a kind of medicine. One we have in our age of pills and private appointments, and people suffering quietly behind closed doors, partially forgotten how to give. I want to be careful not to overcorrect here into romanticizing the past. Let me be plain. I am not saying ancient life was better for people with mental illness. In many cases, it was surely far worse, marked by terror, abandonment, holes cut in skulls, and suffering with absolutely no relief. The modern world has given us genuine treatments, real medication, real therapy, real understanding of the brain, things that save and transform lives every single day, and I would not trade them for anything. The point is not that they had it figured out and we don't. The point is subtler, and it's this. They had one piece we have partly lost, and we have many pieces they never dreamed of. The ideal, maybe, is to hold both. So when you zoom all the way out, what did ancient humans do with the minds that didn't fit? The honest answer is everything. They revered them and they feared them. They made some of them into healers and seers, the most important people in the group. And they cut holes in the heads of others to release the spirits they believed were trapped inside. They protected some and abandoned some. There was no single ancient response because there was no single ancient idea of what a troubled mind even was. What there was, almost always, was a framework that gave the experience meaning and a small, inescapable group of people who had to reckon with it together, in the open, with no one else to hand it to. And here's where it comes back to you. The way we understand a struggling mind as a medical condition, treatable, diagnosable, located in the individual, is powerful and real, and has relieved an enormous amount of suffering. But it is also, in the long sweep of human history, brand new. For nearly all of our existence, a mind in crisis was not a private medical event. It was a communal one, held by the whole group, woven into a story about spirits and gifts and meaning. We traded that frame for medicine, and on the whole, that was a good trade. But if you have ever felt that the modern way of dealing with mental pain can be strangely lonely, strangely clinical, strangely cut off from other people, you're noticing something true. Your ancestors would have found it baffling that we so often suffer in private. To them, a mind was never just one person's problem. It belonged to everyone around the fire. So here's my question for you. Do you think we've gained more than we've lost in how we understand the troubled mind? Or have we lost something ancient and important along the way? Let me know in the comments, and please be kind to each other in there. This one matters. Until then, take care of yourselves and take care of the people around you. I'll see you soon.